Good evening. My name is Summer and I am a alcoholic. Welcome to our Friday night Big Book Compendium Big Book Study. The spiritual life is not a theory. So happy to be here. Wonderful faces that I'm looking at. This is going to be an amazing night. We are in more about alcoholism right now, and we are in the middle of page 38. So we're going to dive right back in. I have a special guest here with me tonight, Howard E. And I want to give him an opportunity to introduce himself before we begin. And then we're going to just go right in. Howard?
Sure. My name is Howard Ebert, and I am an alcoholic. I thank you for offering me this chair for the evening. Thank you, Steve, as well, and all my friends who showed up here. Chris and, of course, love of my life, Kathy is here. Thank you all, and thank you uh, for Summer for giving me this opportunity here to catch up. Before we start the reading, let me just kind of bring us up to where we are here. We have previously, in the previous chapters, been learning about the problem. We're talking about step one. And by the time Bill gets to this chapter, he's probably thinking, well, there are probably some people who are not going to have a great feeling about this spiritual experience that I've been talking about. So let me write a chapter about the insanity of trying to recover without that, the failure of self-will. Step two says that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. And if you're like me, I got insulted at that because I was sane. As long as I'm not drinking and drugging, don't call me insane. I'm as sane as anybody else. As long as I've stopped drinking and drugging, I did some crazy, stupid things when I was under the influence, but I'm not anymore. So don't tell me I'm insane. Well, just like so many other things in this book, I had to look up the definitions of certain words. And the word sanity was defined as the ability to recognize the truth. If that's the case, then insanity means belief in a lie. And that's when I started to recognize that I may have been insane because the crazy, stupid things I did when I was under the influence, that's intoxication, that's inebriation. You get a head full of chemicals like alcohol, which lower your inhibitions, watch out. You're going to do some crazy, stupid things you wouldn't ordinarily do. That doesn't make you insane. It makes you high. It makes you inebriated. It doesn't make you insane. And Bill begins this chapter with using a couple of different words on page 30. He introduces us to this notion of insanity by using the words obsession and illusion and insanity and delusion, all of which boil down to belief in a lie. And so, in order for us to see that we have been prey to that, Bill, like great teachers do, gives us examples. So, the first example he gave us, and let me put this up here, let me show you a little bit of a graphic here. Since I'm a visual person, I always like to be visual. He gave us the man of 30. The man of 30's lie that he fell into, because every one of these stories is a line where they cross into being insane. The point at which the man of 30 crossed into being insane was after his long period of sobriety, 25 years, and self-discipline, that qualified him to drink like any other men. So he retired. Out came the carpet slippers and the bottle, and the outcome was he was drunk. He was dead. Within 4 to 5 years, he drank himself to death. And then there was our friend Jim, the car salesman, whose insanity was he thought he could drink whiskey if he put it in milk. Not only is that insane, it's disgusting. But it's a waste of very good whiskey too, incidentally. But and clearly our friend Jim didn't have an alcohol problem. He had a milk problem. That's really where the problem was, the mixing with the milk. But in any case, he was crazy, when he said he could do that, he ordered the whiskey, put it in the milk. The experiment went so well, he ordered another one. And the end result was one more journey to the asylum for Jim and the mental and physical suffering that drinking always caused him. And we're about to get to the next two stories here, the jaywalker and our friend Fred, the accountant. But I just wanted to kind of fill us into where we're at, which brings us to the line that Heather keeps mentioning about you may think our illustration too ridiculous. Is that where you're going to start, incidentally?
Yes.
Okay, so he's pointing out that he's going to point out how absurd and ridiculous our behavior is by being absurd and ridiculous, by giving us a story that most of us are going to say that's ridiculous, that's absurd, that's just nonsense. But if we look at it honestly, we could see that we are the same as this guy. And that's what he's referring to here when he talks about our illustration being too ridiculous, because he's about to get even more ridiculous. I'm sorry, that assuming we continued, we read the Jaywalker story. That's right. You read that last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I was off in that. So his mistake was he thought he can jump in front of fast-moving vehicles. That was his insanity. He continues that behavior, keeps getting not wind up in the hospital, and the outcome was he shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he gets out, he races in front of a fire engine and breaks his back. And Bill is saying, "You think that's ridiculous?" Well, if you substituted alcohol for jaywalking, it would fit our lives exactly. And that's what he's talking about. You think running in front of moving cars is ridiculous. It is. But isn't picking up alcohol after knowing what it does to us every time we drink it, isn't that as absurd and as ridiculous as a guy who dashes in front of moving cars just for fun? And that's where we are today. We start at that assumption that you think we're being ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you want to start?
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much for that introduction. All right. You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? And I think you did a lot of explaining with this paragraph too. Do you have anything else to add with that, Howard?
No, not to that one.
Okay.
The next paragraph.
Okay. Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. So I'm going to make a comment really quick. Exactly. I mean, isn't that just like an alcoholic to have that, like we admit we have some of these symptoms, some of them, but not all of them. So then that excludes us from then that's not us. Or also another thing that I find a lot of alcoholics say, like, we haven't lost everything in life, or we didn't do that, but we did this, and so that's not me. So yeah, I like that. And I love Bill's humor here at the end. Thanks for the information. Or who, I'm not sure exactly who said it, but Bill, wrote it. Thanks for the information, like sarcastically, like, yeah. That's it.
If I might add, there actually should be a phrase after that, after reading that paragraph, saying, "Thanks for the information, kiss my ass."
Right.
Really what should be there, because we're not buying into what he just said. Because in the previous paragraph, we're not talking about this notion of a high bottom or low bottom drunk. That drives me crazy when I hear that kind of stuff, because we're not talking about what you lost, what you didn't lose. We're not talking about what type of bottom you may have hit. We're talking about one thing here, and one thing only. Can we or can we not distinguish the truth, excuse me, about alcohol? If we can, then we're sane. If we convince ourselves that we could safely drink, then we're insane. We've crossed that line. And whether you're a high bottom drunk or a low bottom drunk, whatever you want to call it, we all get drunk the same way. And that is believing in a lie. And this guy is saying that doesn't apply to me. I have all the self-knowledge for what I've learned about myself. That's self-knowledge. It won't happen again. So thanks for the information, buddy, but kiss my ass. It doesn't apply to me. And that's basically where we are in the story before we get into the next example.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and the low bottom, high bottom is, I mean, I remember, when I came to, and started this journey. I had everything. I had everything. I didn't lose anything. I hadn't lost all these things. It was that internal like that internal feeling that I had inside. Like, so who can really tell me if I had if I was a high or a low bottom drunk, if that makes sense,
Mhm. As our friend Chris, who's here today, as Chris taught me, it's not about how much you drank. It's not about what you drank. It's not about when you drank. It's not about how much you did or didn't lose when it comes to alcohol. It's about one thing and one thing only. What is your relationship to alcohol in
Mm-hmm.
terms of power, choice, and control? And if you think you have power, choice, and control, that's where you're insane, because an
Mm-hmm.
alcoholic doesn't. The truth of the matter is, we don't have any power, choice, or control when it comes to alcohol. And it doesn't matter when you drank, how often you drank, what you drank, whether you got arrested or not, none of that. It doesn't matter. What is your relationship to alcohol? Can you see the truth or not?
Awesome. Thank you. All right. That may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize to smash home upon our alcoholic readers, as it has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. Let us take another illustration. Before we take another illustration, what do you have to say about that, Howard?
Well, first of all, the paragraph begins by talking about the non-alcoholic. Whenever I see the words real alcoholic in this book, I tell my people to underline it and above it write A/O, which means allergy and obsession. So above where it says non-alcoholic in the first line, I've written no A, no O, no allergy, no obsession. And how do I know that? Because in the third line, and it should be underlined, it says that they're able to stop or moderate. The real alcoholic is not able to stop or moderate. So that's how we know this guy is not a real alcoholic. And this is what's really important. This should be highlighted all the way through, beginning with the actual or potential alcoholic. And I've underlined alcoholic, and above the word alcoholic, what did I write? A/O, because I don't ever want to forget that they're talking about me. And when they're talking about an alcoholic, it means the allergy and the obsession. But the real alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is not an intellectual exercise. If it was, we'd stop at step one. That's what he's saying here, that knowledge is not enough. And then this is really beautiful. He says, this is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize to smash home. Does that sound familiar? He says to smash home upon our alcoholic readers, as it has been revealed to us at a bitter experience, not theory, incidentally, bitter experience. And the reason why I say it sounds familiar, because back on page 30, if you want to turn back to page 30 for just a moment, keep your place where you're at, but we're going to connect some dots here. On page 30, paragraph 2, it ends with the delusion that we are like other alcoholics or presently may be. What? Has to be smashed. Has to be smashed. So the delusion that we can drink like other people has to be smashed. And the fact that knowing that alone is not going to keep us sober, that idea has to be smashed as well. That it doesn't stop at step one. That's the key point there. At a bitter experience, and he's going to say, okay, here's another example of some guy who's crossed the line. Let's see if we can figure out where and when he crossed that line. So you go ahead, start reading.
Okay. Fred is partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good. He has a fine home, is happily married, and the father of promising children of college age. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred. To all appearance, he is a stable, well-balanced individual.
Could you reread those first 3 words, please? Of that sentence.
Okay. To all appearance?
Yeah. To all appearance. We're talking about the outside. To the outside, what does he seem like to you?
Like he's put together. And, yeah.
Finish the sentence. That is a stable,
well-balanced individual.
Does that sound familiar to you? Let's connect another dot. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No.
important. If you stay where you are, if we go back to page 35, paragraph 2, we're talking about our friend Jim. If we look at page 35, paragraph 2, there's another reference to the same situation.
Okay.
In the middle of the page, it says everybody likes him. He's an intelligent man. Here it is. Normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. There's a lot of nervous people in this chapter. But the point is, to the outside world, our friend Jim here seemed normal, yet he's an alcoholic. Now we're talking about our friend Fred. Once again, to the outside world, to all appearance, he looks like a normal guy, yet he's alcoholic. I'm sorry, you can continue now. Just want
no, this is good. You're good. Okay. All right, I'll read it. To all appearance, he is a stable, well-balanced individual, yet he is alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of jitters.
Another nervous guy. Another nervous guy.
It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. The doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. For a few days, he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so, in spite of his character and standing. Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem. We told him that we knew about alcoholism. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing, or that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that this humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back.
Okay.
It says he had a bad case of jitters. Let's call a spade a spade. He was going through the DTs. That's a bad case of jitters. When an alcoholic stops drinking, he's going through the DTs. So that's why he was sent to the hospital. He says it's a bad case of jitters. Yeah, I'm shaking and I'm puking and I'm cold and that's the DTs. He's withdrawing. And his doctor, not wanting to be the bad guy, doesn't want to say, you may be an alcoholic. So he hinted strongly. That's what intimated means hinted. He hinted strongly that it might be a little worse than he realized. And for days he was depressed about about his condition. In other words, incomprehensible demoralization. When the truth was starting to be told to him, he made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. Made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. An alcoholic who makes up his mind can't do anything about it. We cannot apply our mind to solve a problem that was created by the same mind. So a sick mind cannot heal a sick mind. So it's pointless to say that he made up his mind that he would quit altogether. It never occurred to him that he could not do so. Then it says Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic. So if he's in a state of denial, if he would not accept step one, then he could not accept the spiritual malady, the spiritual remedy to the malady. If you don't take step one, you can't take step two. That's what he's saying down here, that self-knowledge, self-will, self-determination, self-confidence, self-deception, anything that begins with self is doomed to failure. That's what all of this is about. And there's an interesting thing you may want to notice. It says, first of all, we came in contact with him for the first time. That means they approached him. One of the things we like to do in our workshop is we highlight in blue, for what it's worth, all of the approach references, because it's throughout this book. Bill is telling us it is not our job to stand and be ready to help. It is our job to approach the newcomer. They approach the person who is in trouble. And so that's one of the hints at it here. We came in contact with them. Yeah, they came to the hospital and they came in contact with them. And what's the first thing they did? Told them what they knew about alcoholism. Every single story in this book that involves working with another alcoholic begins by saying, we told them what we knew about the problem. We told him about the disease of alcoholism. We told him that, and he said, I got some of the symptoms, right? So he's a little pregnant, right? That's what he's saying. I'm not as bad as the rest, as you guys. I'm just a little pregnant, right? There's no such thing as a little pregnant or a little dead. You either are or you aren't. And the same thing applies to being an alcoholic. And he said that he was positive that his humiliating experience, fear, and his experience being his self-knowledge would keep him sober for the rest of his life. And the last sentence, self-knowledge would fix it. I've added a couple of words there, self-knowledge and fear, because fear is just as unreliable a higher power as self-knowledge is. Neither one of them are going to keep us sober for long. Just like frothy emotional appeals may keep us sober for a period of time. In Bill's story, he said fear sobered him for a little bit. All of these things will work for a little bit, but they are unreliable solutions. They will not solve the problem. And that's what he's saying here. So we've got the beginning of a 12-step call here when they called on him in the hospital and he didn't want to hear what they had to say. Now you could take it from the next part.
Okay. We heard no more of Fred for a while. One day we were told that he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told is most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all his other concerns, yet was flat on his back nevertheless.
Absolutely. First of all, please notice he called them. He called them. So when they made their first call and he basically, thanks for the information, kiss my ass, I don't want to know anything about it. They planted a seed. The same way Ebby planted a seed with Bill. And when Bill was in the hospital for the last time, he remembered Ebby said something, and had Ebby come back and he said, tell me what that little formula was one more time. So it teaches us when we go on a 12-step call, we're planting seeds if the person doesn't want to take the information and do something about it now. Leave that door open. If you make it sound difficult, he's not going to call you. And that's what happened here. He called them because they left that door open. And the description here, the last few lines, you may just right next to the paragraph, you may just want to write, see page 21:1 for the description of the real alcoholic, because that's exactly what's pointed out here, that he was convinced he had to stop. He had no excuse for drinking. He exhibited splendid judgment and determination in every other area except when it came to alcohol. That's exactly what it describes on page 21. He fit the description perfectly. So he's calling them and they're coming back, and let's see what happened.
Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, that I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. I'll keep reading.
Well, if you want to add anything or you want me to jump in here, one of the things to be careful about this last sentence where he says it was only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. The phrase keeping on guard is dangerous. The phrase keeping on guard comes from rehabs that tell you to, quote, watch for your triggers. Watch for your triggers. For an alcoholic, any day of the week that ends in a Y is a trigger. There's no such thing as anything that could make me drink or not make me drink. That's nonsense. So be careful with those phrases about keeping on guard. That's basically psychobabble for watch for your triggers. And a real alcoholic, we don't need a reason. Like I said, well, any day that ends in a Y is a trigger for me to drink. Okay. And he's also saying at the beginning that he recognized that the problem was this subtle insanity that precedes the first drink, but he told himself that I hadn't hit bottom yet, that I still had some willpower. And that's where he is right now. Is after he left the hospital last time, he thought with the self-knowledge he got from the doctors and from them, that subtle insanity, all I got to do is watch out for my triggers and I'll be okay.
Mhm.
Watch what happens.
Right. In this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time, all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard work of a simple matter. One day, I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. So no triggers.
No, well, the 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 first trigger is where he says, I'm making too big of a deal of this.
Yeah, yeah.
You want to watch for triggers? That's one of the things to watch for. When you tell yourself, I'm making too big a deal of this thing, staying dry is easy. He's experiencing sobriety, not sobriety. That a lot of people think his drunk begins right here when he said, I'm making too big a deal of this thing. Staying sober is easy. And then he describes how wonderful things were. Physically, he felt fine, right? I had no pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. My partners would be thrilled with me. I was pleased. I knew my partners would be. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. Everything is good in his life at this point. This is not Fred. It's not our friend Jim, who was working in an establishment he used to own and lost because of his drinking. This is not a guy who came to work every day with a resentment, a chip on his shoulder that he's working for somebody he probably hired as a salesman. This guy hasn't lost a thing. Not a thing. Being in the hospital once may have been embarrassing, but he hasn't lost anything. Our friend Jim, the car salesman, lost everything. So let's see where they wind up.
All right. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold, and a squiggly line, as I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to my mind that it would be nice to have a couple cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail and my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed. So I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty the next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxi cab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and I did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering.
I'm going to reread the first few lines of this paragraph.
Okay.
As I went to my hotel room and leisurely dressed for dinner, as I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind, it'd be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner and return to the rehab. Now, it didn't say that, did it? That would have been the truth. But he didn't act on the truth. It didn't occur to him. Our friend Jim vaguely sensed, quote unquote, vaguely sensed he wasn't being any too honest when he had the idea about putting the alcohol in the milk. He had a vague sense that he was fooling himself. This guy was so cocksure of himself that he knew it would be just fine. I'll have a couple of cocktails and that'll be it for dinner. That's the lie that he fell prey to. There's where he crossed over from being sane to insane. If he would have said, have a couple of cocktails and return to the treatment center, and then went about his business without taking that drink, he would have not been acting on a lie. But he didn't say that. What he said was, be a nice idea to have those drinks. And he acted on that idea, on that lie. And once it was in him, that was it. There was no more control. It's inside him, and the allergy takes over. After dinner, he went for a walk. He returned to the hotel. It struck me a highball would be great before going to bed. The alcohol is in him now. The allergy has taken over. So when he says that, it occurred to me, that's all nonsense. That's all rationalization. He's not thinking anymore. His body is calling the shots. And his body is saying, hey, this walking is crazy. Let's get back to the bar and do some serious drinking. That's what we're here for. And that's what happened. Complete carnage. The driver escorted me about for several days. That's complete carnage. He doesn't know where he was. He didn't know what he did. This guy was driving him around, and he just kept peeling off big bills because this guy had plenty of money. In a minute, I'll give you some biographical information about this guy. But he was doing blackout drinking, complete seeking of oblivion. That's what he was doing. That's what he did. And unbearable mental and physical suffering. In other words, incomprehensible demoralization. In other words, he's visited by terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. The four horsemen come to visit him after that drinking spree.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time, I had not thought of the consequences at all. I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come. I would drink again. They had said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. Wow.
Yeah. First of all, he said at the beginning of the paragraph, there's actually two questions that are posed here. It says, not only had I been off guard, I made no fight whatever against the first drink. So the question there is, why was he unable to raise a fight against the first drink? That's question number A. B, this time I had not thought of the consequences at all. Question, why did he not think of the consequences? The answers to both of those questions is found on page 24. And if you turn to page 24, the famous italics on page 24 answers those questions. our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. So
Yep.
that answers the question about why had I made no fight whatsoever? Well, it's because we're being told that willpower is practically non-existent. And the second question about I had not thought of the consequences at all is because I'm unable at certain times, and certain times means absolute. It's going to happen. I'm unable to bring into my consciousness with sufficient force the memory and suffering of humiliation of even a week or a month ago. And the answer to both questions is that last line. We are without defense against the first drink.
Yep.
So he raised these two questions that have already been answered if you're a real alcoholic. And he didn't realize, he's now starting to realize that. He said that if I had an alcoholic mind, what does that mean? Not spiritually fit.
Mm-hmm.
He's not spiritually fit. He hasn't worked any steps. Even if he recognized he was an alcoholic, he hasn't worked the steps. He's not spiritually fit. So, of course, the day will come when he will pick up the drink. How do I know that? And I'm hoping I didn't have to have anyone turn to this page, but it tells you why on the bottom of page 14 that if you do not perfect and enlarge your spiritual life through intensive work with others, you will drink again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what's going on here. He did nothing spiritually to change his situation. So he had an alcoholic mind. And of course, some trivial reason. A trivial reason means a lie. That's what trivial reason is, a lie. If I had an alcoholic mind, there's his moment of clarity. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots, those obsessions. I'd never been able to understand people who said a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. In other words, Fred is beginning step one. Finally,
Yeah.
finally.
Yeah. Finally. I mean, and just in this paragraph, it's like, wow, like he goes from that all the way down. Like, I mean, it's amazing to see. It was a crushing blow. And like that he realizes it finally. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's, um, it's, yeah. Could you explain the strange mental blank spot?
Strange mental blank spots are the obsessions.
Those are the obsessions.
Those are the obsessions
Yeah.
that we cannot see around them. We cannot
Okay.
change that. It's a blank spot. We cannot see our way through to the other side.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
That's what that means. The obsession has taken over. The obsession is you don't have an allergy. You
Mm-hmm.
can you can
Yeah.
handle it. Whatever form that takes, that mental blank spot. For our friend Jim, the blank spot was put it in milk. It'd be okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had a blank spot over staying sober is easy. These are mental blank spots. This is how insidious this disease is. These are the various forms that the obsession takes, these strange mental blank spots.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Yeah. All right. And here comes the good part. 2 of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like so much, and then asked me if I thought myself alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. I had to concede both propositions. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality such as I had exhibited in Washington was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself.
Yeah.
So that is our job as we go in there and to ask the alcoholic, are you done? I wouldn't say licked, but like, are you done? Is this it? Are you ready? Are you finished? Capiche? Done? And I like how he uses concede again, like that we had to concede in both propositions. Like both of those questions needed to be like a adamant yes,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
right?
And
And
go ahead.
yeah.
No, go ahead, please.
Oh no, and I was just gonna say, and it's beautiful that the last thing he says is this whole process, this paragraph, the process of the two alcoholics coming actually snuffed out that last little flicker, like that reservation, that little like, well, maybe I could, like that we actually know about, like, sometimes or I'll say me, I say, well, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. When they came, when the alcoholics came, it snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that maybe I could do it myself too. Like I know I can, I can do anything myself, right? And that had to be snuffed out too.
Well, what you just read is Fred's first step.
Hmm.
Explanation of Fred's complete deflation of ego. The notion that he can stay sober based on self-knowledge has to be smashed. The delusion that we can drink like other people has to be smashed. Both of those things are smashed. That's what you're hearing here. Complete self-deflation. At the beginning of this paragraph, once again, they came to see him. They called on him. They approached him. So where it says they came to see me, that's an approach reference. And we're probably talking about Bill and Hank or Bill and Fitz, because that's pretty much all we had in those days in New York. They grinned. Yeah, they probably said, we've been saving a seat for you, kid. Right? Ever hear that one before? I'm sure we all
Yeah.
dusting it off, keeping this seat for you, kid. Which I didn't like, of course not. And then they asked me the two parts of step one. If I thought myself an alcoholic, the first part,
Hmm.
and if I was really licked this time, in other words, fully conceded. I had to, and incidentally, for anyone who says there are no musts in this book, here's an example of must only taking another form. Had to means must.
Right.
So I must concede to both propositions. Notice he doesn't say surrender. Are you aware of the fact that the word surrender doesn't appear anywhere in the first 164 pages of this book? Not once. Not once does that word appear. The word Bill, you think it's on every page, the way we throw it around at meetings and use that as a topic for discussion, how you surrendered. Well, let's remember, Germany surrendered after World War One. Then what happened?
Uh,
They conceded after World War II. Concede means absolute, total, unconditional surrender. In the military, when you surrender, you take your rifle and you hold it up above your head like this. That's surrender, right?
right.
Concede, concession in the Army is you take your rifle, put it down in front of you, take off your belt with your knife and your gun and your ammunition, put that on the ground in front of you, take your knife and your derringer out of your boot, put that on the ground in front of you, then step back about 5 feet, get on your knees and do this. That's absolute total concession. That's different than surrender, which is just this. Can you see the difference?
Hmm.
That's why we have to concede. Absolute, total, unconditional surrender. And that's what he did. That's what was snuffed out. That last flicker that he could do this thing himself. Complete deflation of ego. Are we running out of time?
We are.
Okay, then let me just show you one more thing so we can get out of here in case anyone is remotely interested in this stuff about who this guy is.
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'll show you who he is. Let me bring it up here. Nope, that's not it. Hang on a sec. I should have Andy here for this. Okay, Harry Brick is his name. This story is based on a guy by the name of Harry Brick. Harry Brick's story, called A Different Slant, was in the first edition. It was deleted. Harry eventually sued Alcoholics Anonymous for the money that he had lent us to raise money for the book. For what it's worth, his story is the only one of the two stories in the first edition that makes no reference to God. Nowhere in his story, and his story is one of the shortest stories in the book, because he says that the whole point of his story is that you can have a lot of money, because he did. He was very wealthy. You could still be an alcoholic and still be wealthy. And he said that's the only point he wanted to make. So he never made any mention of God. And incidentally, if you want to know who the other story was that didn't mention God, most times I ask that question and people say, well, it must be Hank Parkhurst. No, it wasn't. It's not. The other story that didn't mention God in the first edition is Hindsight by Myron Williams. The only two stories in the first edition that don't talk about God are A Different Slant, Harry Brick's story, and Myron Williams' story. So if you're interested, that's who we're talking about here. This handsome young man is Harry Brick.
All right. Well, it is 9:02, and I just want to thank Howard for just bringing in so much amazing information and just such a I love studying with you. That's awesome, and I want to thank you actually for spending your Friday night here with us. And what we do is I'm going to turn off the recording, and then we just have questions and answers, and then we'll pray out after that. So again, thank you so much, and look forward to seeing all of you next week. All of you guys that were here tonight, 33 of you. Hope to see you next week. And thank you again.
Oh, and thank you for inviting me again. Steve, thank you as well. And thank you for all my friends who showed up. I can't start running down names because I'll leave somebody out. But of course, Kathy, thank you so much. I love you. And Chris, I love you too, Chris.
I love you too, Chris and Kathy. All right.